Your seat. Thank you. My name is Burak, and I'm the president of Games for Change. Really excited to have you here. Thank you for coming. I want to start by acknowledging this partnership that we're really proud of with the Department of Education of the US and with the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association. I want to say that those two entities, I mean, one coming from the commercial gaming industry and one from the government, from education, made this whole thing possible, but also gave it this great tone and vibe of really a meeting between the best in gaming and the best in education. I want to thank Richard and Joseph and Eric from the Department of Education for driving the content and the curation. And I want to thank Eric, Michael, Diana and their team from ESA for their generous contribution to make it happen. This is something we see as a pilot, so we really want to hear your feedback at the end of this dense and full and rich day. We really want to hear your feedback and think about next year how it could be better, larger, and even more effective. I also want to mention two things that I'm seeing kind of with my perspective, running Games for Change for 5 years, making my first Game for Change 10 years ago. I'm excited about two things here. One is how the conversation is becoming much more sophisticated and nuanced. 2 years ago, I remember at Games for Change, we had a session with Gates Foundation showing the research on how games in learning are effective. And that was the conversation for the first decade, the why. Why we need to use games all the time, trying to prove and talking about the metrics and talking about the research. And I think that in the last year or two, and especially today in this summit, you will see the conversation shifting to how. You will see the conversation much more about best practices, about people that are doing it for quite some time. So it's not, again, like those pioneering, fresh initiatives. You will have hands-on workshops with some of the best in the field. So this is really exciting that we're kind of becoming, we're not again in the effort to prove, we're in the effort to make it much more sustainable and something that can go long term. The second thing, and I hinted it before, is that the players are changing. We have this organic community of great developers that are coming from Games for Change and other communities, and they're becoming better because they have already a few titles under their belt. But we also see the players from the industry. So today you'll have a chance to meet Microsoft and Ubisoft, and you will meet the developers of Angry Birds from Rovio, and you will meet Unity, one of the most successful engines in the industry. And that interest is relatively new. The idea that education is no longer a taboo word for gaming industry, but that they're very seriously exploring this. So I'm very excited to introduce the next speaker. Again, our partner, Richard Culatta, the director of the Office of EdTech at the Department of Education. Thank you and enjoy the day.
Good morning. One more time, let's try it. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, there we go. I know it's early. We're glad you're here. And not just because you're you, but we're really glad you're here because a whole bunch of people didn't make it thanks to a snowstorm. It's like May, right? And we're having snowstorms in different parts of the country, apparently. So we hope that some people will be joining us later today, but really glad you were able to find your way through the blizzards across the country and get here on time. I have a blue screen that I'd like to show you. I've been working on it for quite some time. Oh, there we go. That's the one I'm looking for. Let me just start by echoing Ossi's comments that we are thrilled to be part of this partnership, to have a great discussion today about games for learning and the potential they have to be really, really transformative. This is an example, a perfect example of what a good public-private partnership looks like, to do things that neither the government or a private industry or a nonprofit sector can do on their own, and so we're really excited to be part of this day. I want to just share a few thoughts to kick off the morning and then hand this off to people who are much smarter and much more experienced in this space than I am. I want to start by telling you about something I discovered when I was still a teacher. I ran across the work of an English photographer named Mr. Toledano. Some of you may be aware of his work. What he did was he went out and gave people video games, and then he took pictures of them while they were playing the video games to capture their expressions and their emotions. It was fascinating to see the types of engagement that you get when you watch the faces of people that are playing these games. And the thought that came to my mind as a teacher at the time was, what would it have looked like had he done the same activity but instead taken pictures of my kids doing homework? Wouldn't have looked like that. And it started me on a journey now of almost 20 years of thinking about how can games be used to really transform and reimagine learning. And so what I want to do is very quickly share you 5 areas where I think there's great potential for games to be particularly transformative. The first is games have an ability to put learners in control. Lots of educational researchers have shown this. There's a whole pile of studies that talk about the value of giving students choice and autonomy. Crazy Dave also knows it too. So between educational researchers and Crazy Dave, you'll probably find out that that's a good thing to do. Somebody I was talking to from Electronic Arts, and they said that in the EA Sports games, they intentionally are designed to give players a decision, a choice to make every 1 to 2 seconds, and feedback on those choices every 7 to 10 seconds. That's an amazing concept that we do not apply in general education practice, and one that we can learn very powerfully from games. Just for the record, when we do stuff like this in education, this does not count as giving students choice or autonomy. I know, I'm sorry to break that news to you, but that is, in fact, the case. There are some fantastic opportunities. This is a game called Our Courts that some of you may be familiar with. Some of you here may have even worked on it, which allows students to make decisions about court cases. It sets up parameters, and then within those parameters allows them to have the autonomy to make their own decisions and to learn. Second thing I'm excited about, games have the ability to adapt to learners' needs in some pretty amazing ways. Every student is going to need different things at different times. Their abilities are different. They have, on a daily basis, where they're at, what their level of competency is, will be changing. And there's something that all of the educational researchers in the room are familiar with, and it's a concept by an educational psychologist named Lev Vygotsky, and it's called the zone of proximal development. And basically, what he said was, there's this thing, it's this circle, I'm representing it as a circle, of things that you can do, skills that you have that you can successfully demonstrate. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that falls outside of that bucket, and those are the things that you can't do. But then there's this space, it's this really awesome space that's right on the edge, hovers right on the rim between those two, called the zone of proximal development. And it's the stuff that you can do with a little bit of support, a little bit of help. And then as you do that with a little bit of help and support, the circle of the stuff that you can do grows, and then your zone of proximal development moves out into the stuff that you couldn't do at all before. Games do a wonderful job of holding people like a surfer on a wave in their zone of proximal development. And you know this is true because if games were too easy, if they were just squarely in the center of the green part, it'd be boring because everybody knew how to do them. If they were too hard, you'd give up. But if you can just hold people right in their zone of proximal development, you will get people to play for hours and hours and hours. And so that's a very powerful piece of learning that we can take from the way games approach this. And this is true for not just games that are very fun to play, but ones that actually teach as well. There's an interesting game that some of you may have played where it starts by having you just move some junk around a pond. And after a little while, that junk in the pond starts to turn into some X's and B's. And before you know it, you have kids, and I've had my kids do this, solving full algebraic equations because it's just gradually expanding their zone of proximal development. Really powerful stuff. Number 3, games allow for safe failure. There's the famous IBM founder quote about doubling your failure rate if you want more opportunity to succeed. In education, we have a bit of a challenge because we're very failure adverse. And unfortunately, by being so failure adverse, we lose some great opportunities to learn. If I take an algebra test and I fail it, there are immediate negative consequences, but the most severe one is I don't have that as a learning opportunity. However, if we take example of a good game, where failure actually becomes the opportunity to try again and get it right. Could you imagine what a terrible game experience would be if you got it right the first try? If you went on and played and you just won the game? It'd be a horrible game. And so part of what's so powerful is the opportunity that failure is an opportunity to play more. And in the learning space, we need to be able to harness that as well. Failure, learning something, doing something wrong needs to be an opportunity to get to play more, to get to engage more. And sometimes that means your plant is going to die. And sometimes that means you're going to get yelled at by the judge. But you always will get an opportunity to learn. Number 4, games put learning in context. Another challenging thing that we tend to do in education is we explain lots of abstract concepts. And along with those abstract concepts, we have to give a lot of long abstract instructions. So we say things like this: there's a shape, and here's where you put it, divide the screen in half, move it in the middle, 2 inches up from the bottom. We give these sort of long explanations. But with games, we do something very different. There's an important first step that we put in, and we start with some context. And we say, this is the context in which this activity will happen. Now, here's something that we explain, and then we present a problem. And very complex, difficult tasks suddenly become much easier to conquer because we've provided some context around something that really previously didn't have much relevance. And this is something that we see throughout all kinds of really fantastic games. Number 5, games help us rethink assessing learning. We are in a very interesting time right now. There is so much debate about testing, about making sure how much testing should happen, how much testing should be allowed in schools. And there's this back and forth because we have a lot of people saying too much testing is happening in schools. And on the other hand, we say, but if we don't test students, then we have it's very clear that some students get left behind. And that other students it could go way too long before we realize when they're off track and have really detrimental concepts. And so there's this test, not test, test, not test debate. But what I'm really excited about is a third option that people aren't talking about yet, which is, why don't we just build some better tests? Why don't we build assessments that feel like this? That feel like games that people want to continue to play and engage in. And we absolutely can do that. And so let's shift that discussion and show what phenomenal assessments can look like that are indistinguishable from the fun, engaging part of the learning experience. So my last piece here is, why now? Maybe 2 reasons for why now, and there's probably a bunch. If I asked all of you to raise your hands and say why now, you'd have a reason, and it would all be good and maybe better than mine. But I want to give you 2 reasons why I think it's really important that we think about this now. The first is we have an opportunity to leverage new infrastructure that we did not have before. I want to put that in perspective for 1 second. There's an initiative that we have called the ConnectEd initiative. That was something that we've worked on under the direction of the president, and the goal was to get schools connected to broadband. When we started, there's about 100,000 schools in the country. When we started, about 30,000 schools had access to high-speed internet in the classroom, which is a big problem. Based on some really significant changes that are happening in some programs through the FCC and some programs at the Department of Education, within about 2 years, 70,000 schools are going to come online in a way they hadn't been before. 70,000 schools will have access to internet in the classroom that they have not had before. That is, I believe, one of the most important, most significant changes that we have seen, maybe that we will ever see in the history of education, is the ability to connect those schools to the future. And along with that shift is going to become an opportunity to use all kinds of new types of media, tools, and approaches to make this happen. I will tell you, and I will be really clear, that if we do not come up with some really fantastic options to leverage there will be plenty of people that are willing to take a textbook and scan it into a PDF and put it onto a tablet, and that will be the type of media that is used in those connected classrooms. And if that happens, shame on us all. And so what we need to do is help make sure there are great, compelling alternative options. And that ties into my second opportunity, which is why now. And my second part of why now is that we are in the middle of a shift across the country of adopting new curricular standards, new opportunities to do harder, more challenging tasks in schools, more challenging activities that are more relevant and that align to what students need when they get to college and career. And along with that shift comes a whole lot of rethinking of all of the types of educational materials that we're using in schools today. And it turns out that that list of curricular standards makes a really nice set of game design challenges. And so I think that's one of the ways that we need to be looking at what those are. And so with that in mind, don't shy away from the hard topics. Go pick the hard tasks. Don't settle for quick little games that just kind of reinforce something that isn't really necessary. Go for the big, tough topics and show how we can use these tools to transform learning. We just released a guide last week to help you do this. This is a guide called the EdTech Developers Guide and gives lots of examples and ideas for how you can leverage the new infrastructure and a whole variety of supports to make this happen. By the way, we've made a deal that this is available for free to you because you're part of this conference. So you can get this guide by going to tech.ed.gov. Okay? Don't let the word get out too much. But you go and download it from tech.ed.gov and you'll be able to take it with you. My final thought is this. Sometimes I hear people say we need to make learning fun. And I actually fundamentally disagree with that concept. Because learning is fun. We don't need to make learning fun. We need to stop making learning boring. And that is a key task that we all need to be thinking about. Games have a powerful lever. They are a powerful lever to transform learning in our country. If we do it right, we can close persistent achievement gaps, we can push learners to much higher level, and at the same time, greatly increase their level of engagement with learning. And if we do it right, if we get it right, doing homework or taking tests even will feel a lot more like this. Thank you very much. And with that, I want to pass the baton off to a good friend who is an incredible thinker and example in the education community for how we use games in new media. And I want to invite to the stage Rafranz Davis from from Arlington. I almost got in trouble there. Arlington Independent School District. Rafranz, come on up. Warm welcome for Rafranz.
Wait, somewhere there is a flash drive of, there we go. I got it.
You got it.
I got it. So I have to say that I don't even know who's more excited about me being here right now. Me, my teenage son who is pictured, or the students that I taught. And as a matter of fact, when I found out that I was doing this, of course I went to my former students because they, like me, are all gamers. And the response that they gave me was pretty telling about what they felt. So we had this kind of thing in class that if they were a little bit unnerved about something, they would often reply in pictures. And so the picture that they sent me was this one. And it wasn't like a bad thing. How many of you, I don't know if any of you have ever played Minecraft, but there's a certain way you can get Steve to stand to give you the total I am not impressed look. And so this was the I am not impressed, but hello, can I ride in your suitcase because I really want to be there. So I hope to really convey their excitement because you have to know that I'm completely geeking out in a way that I don't get to do in our educational events ever, and that is wrong. So I'm going to kind of take off my Rafranz Davis, the educator hat, and I'm going to introduce you to a person who none of my educator friends have ever met, me the gamer. And that was my game tag back in the day. It actually kind of switched between this one and Ice Diva 11, but this one probably fit a math teacher much better than Ice Diva 11. So I'm not going to bore you with the history of gaming because everybody in this room knows it and you know it at the back of your head. But I will say that we're teaching a different age and a different type of kid these days. My children will never know a life without having a game in the house. They will never know what it's like to have to blow in a cartridge and hope that you can get Mario to work. They won't know what it's like to put it in the freezer because somebody said that worked. On occasion, it did. It did. They also won't know, in most cases when they're older, what a CD is because they're downloading their games from a web on their console or else on their phones. Everything about the children we are teaching is different than the way that we were. So why then would we continue to teach in the way that we do? And why wouldn't we engage them with this extremely powerful medium? So I'm going to kind of take you back to myself as a gamer. Let's just say it was a rainy day at home. I had a lot of rainy days at home. And so growing with my kids, who never had to ask for a game or a console, we just had them, I decided I want to learn how to play guitar. So I'm going to go get the most awkward way of learning to play guitar, and that's with Guitar Hero and then Rock Band, where literally you're playing it with buttons, so you're really not playing guitar. But I remember spending an entire rainy day trying to master When You Were Young, which I will also say is the only way that my mind opened up to really incredible music, was through those games. I grew up on Motown and gospel music. I'd never even listened to rock in my life. But here I was, it's in my head. So if I burst into song a little bit later, it won't even go away. I can't even unsee it right now. But this was my life in existence. And I bring this up because I'm going to segue into Rocksmith. Where were you in 2011? Because when I wanted to learn how to play guitar, why wouldn't you learn with an actual guitar? And then you learn with gaming. And we don't have this game yet because I'll be honest, I've been out of touch in the last few months, maybe year. And so, but I'm going to get it when we go home, because now maybe that guitar that we bought thinking we could play after Rock Band, we could not, is in the closet. But now we can bring it out and we can plug it into any device like console, Mac PC, and actually learn how to play guitar. I will post videos of the process, so look out for that. I will not tell you my YouTube channels, because don't look out for that. So I need you to know that I'm not just Rafranz Davis, the educator, math teacher, technologist. I really am a gamer. I'm not the best gamer. I don't think that matters, but I love this medium. And I love this medium because of the people in this room. You have mastered the art of engagement. You know how to grab us in a second and keep hold of us the entire day. Do you know how hard that is to do in a classroom? It is incredibly hard, but it shouldn't be. But if we combine forces, we can definitely make that happen. What you get is what we need. You ask, what do our users want? And then how can we make what they think they want better? And then the minute you make it, you're already working on the next iteration of that way before it's released. I only just learned that like a month ago. I had no idea that it took that long to make a game. But you do that so well. Imagine if we did that in this education circuit, in this ed tech community. What could we do if we thought, what do our users want, and how can we make what they think they want better? So I'm going to introduce you to two of my favorite games. One of them, not surprising, Minecraft. The other one will surprise you, and it surprised a lot of people, and that's going to have a whole set of dialogue on its own. But Minecraft is a game that I didn't get at first. I compared it to Legos. It is not that at all. It's like Legos on a whole thing of Mountain Dew and a bunch of chocolate. I don't know. But it's like the biggest time suck that you can get in, and you don't even know that you are time sucked by the time that you do it. Our kids are playing this at school now, across the country, at home, on the way to church, on the way to the game, after the game, on an airplane, on a bus, with Wi-Fi, without Wi-Fi. They're playing it all the time. But so are adults. And it's because in this world, they can go create anything that they want. I want to make a dinosaur castle. Go right ahead, make a dinosaur castle. I'm going to make the mouth open. I'm going to make it spit out fire when I push a lever that plays a bunch of different songs, and then other things pop up. I'm going to do that too, and I'm going to spend hours and hours and hours doing it. For me, it's especially personal because I have a 10-year-old nephew, and his name is Braden. Braden goes to school in his standard classroom all day long. I'll talk more about that later. And he comes home, and one of his favorite things is Minecraft. And he goes to YouTube, and he's found this guy named Stampy Longnose. And I'm pretty sure people know who that is. And he watches those videos all day long, and then he puts the videos down, and he makes and makes and makes. But he doesn't just make on Minecraft. He goes outside, and he tries to build, and he sees the world, and then he wants to bring the world into his console, and that's what he does. But then he doesn't stop there. He invites us in. He wants collaborators. He wants people to come in and live in the castles that he builds, destroy what he does, remake it again, and oh, by the way, Amy, will you play all of these mini games that I made, which, by the way, they're different from the 10 you played yesterday? Sure, okay, I will. But that's life, and the only thing he wants in return is to be in Stampy's Love Garden, which still has not happened, but he's doing it every day in the hopes that it will. The Love Garden is a real thing, by the way. Apparently it is not creepy, it actually is a real thing. That's their equivalent of a badge, and I'm okay with that because he's creating. And the thing is, when you create games and we allow children to really dig within themselves and build what they want and build the worlds that they dream of, kids win and we win. We need more of that. Which brings me to my second favorite game for a reason. So I hear that 2 of 3 of the Assassin's Creed team got stuck back behind because of weather. And the last one is Amar, right? Did I say that right? And I don't know if he's here. But I just need to say that my son gave me one directive on the way here. He says, "Mama, I know that you have a really big voice in education, or at least you think you do." I said, "Okay." He said, "You are not to destroy this game. You are not to have them change a thing about it. You are to leave it like it is, and if it changes, I'm blaming you." So I bring up Assassin's Creed for this reason. My son sits in a classroom in history, and he sits in his desk, in his row, and he copies down 45 minutes of notes from PowerPoint every single day. And when he finishes copying down 45 minutes of notes, he then takes a test based on the notes that he just copied down. And he comes home after a long day of doing this and is frustrated. And so he gets out Assassin's Creed, and he's old enough, I approved it. He gets out Assassin's Creed, and he plays. But it's not for him about the violence and the killing that takes place in this game. It is about living in this immersive world, this history, this living history that is completely different from the textbook that he kinda, sorta doesn't read anyway. But he plays it in this game. The most powerful thing that he does is that he does research based on the game when he plays. When he learns about a new character, he asks me out of nowhere, and I thought it was weird. He says, "Who's Paul Revere? Let me go look that up." I said, "Why did you ask that?" "Because I think he's giving me directions." "Oh, okay, that's interesting." But those were the moments that he needed to push and to learn. He loves history now. He doesn't like what happens in his class, but he loves history. And I meant to show the desks. They're kind of boring, so I'm going to move on. So let me be very clear, though. I am not advocating for putting Assassin's Creed in a K-12 environment. That is not the place for it. And if my son comes home and says he was playing Assassin's Creed at school, I'm going to go to the school because you just have to. But what I will say is this. There are things about that game that are engaging and that they are powerful, and you cannot ignore that. So how can we take the innovative approach that the developers of Assassin's Creed have done to really put in the time and the research to build this magnificent environment and bring elements of that into our classroom? There has to be a way. So hopefully through today's conversation, we can get there. Which brings me to my next point before I go on to the games of my classroom. We are not also here to say that games should replace teaching. We need great teachers. We need games so that games can be a foundation of resources for students to help push their curiosity, to help them to think deeper, and to help them to hopefully see the world in a completely different light. And this community, I think, is the key to doing that. So I skipped a slide, but that's okay. I'm going to go back. That was completely accidental. No, I did not skip a slide. There we go. So that brings me to my classroom yet again. The math of my classroom was games created specifically for math. And they were often done using the same formula. And that formula, which we'll talk about in a minute, was really more about giving kids worksheets that were decorated and really pretty with sound, but they weren't really that engaging. And we would go in, this is from my actual class, and you can see the poor child covering up her face. We would go to a lab, and we would sit there like lab rats almost, and play these games. Now there is some value in conceptual understanding types of games on fluency, but those are games that teachers love. Those are not necessarily the type of games that kids are going to run home to play all the time. Angry Birds changed my classroom. Angry Birds was the first mobile game that kind of showed up out of nowhere. I think I was playing on an iPad in between classes, and one of the kids was like, "What are you playing?" "I'm playing this game called Angry Birds." Can I download that?" "I don't care, download it." So they did. And as we played, and this was Algebra 1, they started to kind of notice, oh, when the little bird flies over, that makes like a quadratic pattern. Really? So I started getting the kids to kind of explain a little bit more. What are you thinking? What are you talking about? And it didn't dawn on me that what they were doing were really making connections to what we were doing in class and talking about it through the birds hitting pigs. And the game kept changing and the game kept growing. And my students kept asking even more deeper questions. And then they made the comparison with the formula. Games we play in class, Ms. Davis, are play the skill, test the skill, and then we get a mini game as a reward. That's not gaming. If we're really going to learn through gaming, why can't we just learn while we play? So I think that that year is the year we kind of half wrote a really bad Angry Bird curriculum for class, but it changed. And it really changed because the more games that kids played, the more they started to connect their math we were doing in class to the games on their mobile devices. So then we got to talk about Farmville. And we got to talk about SimCity, and of course, again, Angry Birds. And the questions got deeper and the questions got more, and they wanted to know, so do you think that these developers think about math and science when they make these games? And a few weeks ago, I got that answer, because I got to go watch games being developed at the Austin Game Jam, and I had never seen that. And it wasn't the actual games that they were making that were completely blowing my mind, it was the process that went into it. It was the math and science and making characters and designing a world and creating this space so that the world changed and navigated according to the character or the choice of the player. And then I thought, wow, students could make this. They could make these games. This is a great way for them to apply. Which brings another point. Students making games and then playing in immersive games are two different conversations, but they're two important conversations that definitely need to be had. It would help if I didn't push the left button. Anyway, the right button. So the question that they asked was, why is this different? Why are the games we play that really do apply a lot of math and science, why are they different from the games that you force us to play in class? Used to force to play in class, not force anymore to play in class. Well, I don't have that answer for them, but I think that that's an important question that yet again we need to ask. Why are the games in education different from the games that they go home and play and learn? Why is there a difference? Should there be? And how can we bridge that gap? And the important part of that is so that when students are going home, they're not finishing their homework and then gaming and learning after the homework, but they're doing all of this while they're working, while they're learning, and while they're applying. Because at the end of the day, hopefully, what we get from this event is resources, conversations that can help create this menu of choices so that students can, instead of having their textbooks and worksheets and the way we kind of have always done things but haven't yet changed, to more innovative resources that can help them to become better people, better students, and of course, better scholars. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafranz. And now, on to our next speaker. I want to invite somebody who's been key to this whole process, and frankly, the reason we're here right now is because of generous support from our friends at ESA, and would like to invite the president and CEO of ESA, Mike Gallagher, to come to the stage and share with us some of his thoughts about the gaming industry and how that relates to learning. And then after he speaks for a few minutes, I know I'm a horribly poor substitute for Constance Steinkuhler, but due to some travel issues, she will not be here, but we will still have a conversation with Mike here with all of you. And I want to give one piece of information ahead of that is we will take some questions back and forth, but because we have people joining us online as well as here in the room, we're going to use the hashtag, the G4L15 hashtag. So any questions that you would like to bring up to Mike after his his speech here, please go ahead and start tweeting those, and we'll have them available. Please welcome Mike Gallagher.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for that warm welcome. I'm so impressed and I'm so humbled to be here. I first came to Games for Change 7 years ago, and I've been leading ESA now for coming up on 8 years. Let's see, we'll let you, technical adjustment. And I have to say that it's been inspiring to be around the leaders like yourselves that are creating the education environment for tomorrow. I have the privilege of working on the entertainment side of the industry and working with the leadership of the industry, putting on things like E3, and we'll talk more about those issues tomorrow. But really, what are all these offshoots that come off of these fantastically creative people who have for 20, 30 years been making the most impactful, the most exciting form of entertainment, and seeing it blossom on every device with a screen? It's just very powerful. And I look at the program that's been put together here and the speakers, and I look and say how pleased I am, how warm I feel, and I know how the industry feels to see how many partners are sharing the discussion that we're going to have today. And I'll touch a bit more on that as I come to a close on my remarks. But in that time as leading ESA, one word, this is an industry that's $21 billion domestic, $90 billion worldwide, and it's fundamentally changing the interface between humans and machines. No small task. There's a lot of bravado and a lot of self-absorbed belief that we can make anything happen. And the market proves that in many cases, as we saw you fail forward, it's true. At the same time, we look at the challenges in the education environment or in other social challenges, and we realize there's one key word, and it's the word that I brought back from a meeting with Gary Nell when he was then head of Sesame Street and Michael Levine, is humility. These are huge challenges that we face together, whether it's hunger or the environment or how we fix our own education system here at home, and a much longer list beyond that. And we decided 7 years ago to become a really good partner. And what does that mean and how do we do it? First thing we did is we listened a lot. And I would say that we developed relationships, some of which were halting, some of which were suspicious in the beginning, but now in this room we count many friends, and we're focused on some items that I'll share at the end of my very brief introductory remarks that we're very excited about. And we see great potential. And we see potential far beyond just New York City, beyond Chicago, beyond Los Angeles, but really reaching into high schools and institutions of higher learning throughout the country. I'm particularly close to higher education today because I'm writing checks to 3 public universities for my kids that are in those universities, out-of-state tuition to all 3, so we're doing our part. And I'm delighted that I have 2 daughters who are engineers. So when we talk about STEM subjects and STEM education and what does it take to stimulate a young mind and to create an environment for that, what's the role of the teacher, what's the role of the parent, I feel like I have a little bit of practical advice to share, and I'm certainly have the cash checks to prove it as well. But we also see this constellation of activity around video games which is so powerful. Over 400 universities teach video game curricula or have degrees. We count them once a year. We published a list in September, and it's just remarkable to see how many of those universities have the curricula, many of which are represented here or in the conversations we'll have tomorrow. And what's exciting about the pipeline of what's coming through these universities, some light was shed on that by the Higher Education Video Game Alliance, which is an alliance of 63, Eric? 63 universities, leading universities that have the curricula and the degrees in the space. They went and studied and took a look at their pipeline of students and said, who are these people and how many are coming and what do they look like? And we were delighted to see that over 30% of the students that are enrolled in these programs are women. And that's nearly double the rate that's in computer science, engineering, and in other scientific fields at the same universities. And the retention rate for those students is approaching 90% from first year to second year, which again compares very favorably to overall the retention rate for staying with a program once you start it, which is in the mid-60s to 70%. And I see Tracy Fullerton back here, and Tracy is one of the 4 founding board members of the Higher Education Video Game Alliance. But she's just done, the whole effort is fantastic. I encourage everyone to take a look at it. But universities all around the country are doing remarkable things. And the products now are reaching, I know we're going to have from Dragonbox. Is the CEO of Dragonbox in the room? I saw he's on the program. Don't see him. But looking at University of Washington and what we're able to do by teaching math, and we saw some of that in the presentation immediately prior, is the power of games to communicate very complex subjects and move kids along so rapidly, and we're measuring and assessing the whole step of the way. It's very, very powerful. We look at in the industry itself, and we see that there's a greater collaboration between the entertainment aspects of games and the education aspirations of the education community. We see that with Portal 2, where now, because Valve is such a strong believer in user-generated content, and they saw the power of Portal as a math and teaching tool, in Portal 2, they actually created the ability for puzzles to be a part of the program from the very beginning, and that's very, very, it's a step, it's a sign from a leading game company about the power of that. Now, Minecraft EDU, which is started right here in New York, remarkable stories that come out of that from teachers. I last year moderated a panel of 4 math professors, math teachers from, let's see, I think it would be elementary school to early middle school, combined over 100 years of experience, and 3 of them had won the awards for Teacher of the Year in math. And what they pointed to is exactly what Rafranz pointed to, and Richard before that, is in math today we teach it as a pass-fail subject. And after you fail a few times, you don't want to do it anymore. And if that's the environment we're going to create in our classrooms, we shouldn't be surprised that kids say, you know what, I'd rather do something where I feel like I do better at it. I feel like there's hope. I feel like it's something that I can achieve something with, not something that's a foreign language that I don't understand, and this adult in the front of the room tells me I'm not doing very well. Instead, what these educators said, we should be focusing on how do we create an environment where you muck around with it, where you play with it. You play with it like you would art, because that's what math really is. And when you get to that degree of comfort and aptitude, you're able to move on and do some very, very remarkable things with your life. But there's this period where, especially in middle school, especially with young girls, we have a very significant drop-off in math attention and math aptitude and math desire. And a lot of it has to do with how we're teaching the subject. And this is coming from experts in the field. And then I would also point with great excitement to the work that Jessica Lindell does at the GLASS Lab, the Game Learning and Assessment Lab, which was started as a partnership with Michael Levine as one of the leading ideas, and then the Gates MacArthur Foundation, and Eric Huey, who sits over here, is the inspiration behind much of the work that we do at ESA when it comes to education and the social aspect of games. Put together the GLASS Lab. It went from an idea 4 years ago that was launched at E3 to launch 18 months ago. Now 5,000 teachers are using GLASS Lab games, which are games that have an SRI back end, that are core curriculum compliant and teach real subjects. They're not babysitting. It's very much an applied tool. And over 10 million learning sessions. And this is in a very short amount of time. And it just shows how responsive the industry can be to be helpful and be a good partner and to come such a long way from where we were 7 years ago. I can go on, but I think it'd probably be better if we turn to the question and answer period, and I'll just end with this, is that the partner list that we're so pleased to share includes organizations like the Girl Scouts, Children's Miracle Network. Children's Miracle Network, we've raised using a gaming experience that's done all on one day, kind of like a, not a hackathon, but more like a game jam, yeah, more like that. And we've raised $13 million in the last 2 years for Children's Miracle Network hospitals. And it's just the power of the gamer as part of the charitable exercise. iCivics, is a remarkable, I'm sure we'll hear more about that in the program, remarkable testimony and success of video games to teach civics coming from a former Supreme Court justice who didn't grow up playing video games, but certainly has embraced the power of what they're able to do. We have museums, whether it's MoMA here in New York, the Smithsonian, and others that look at video games and say that they're worthy of artistic protection, expression, and exhibit. And then we have dozens of colleges and universities that we've partnered with on a wide variety of things. And what those all lead to are this notion of inspiration from an industry perspective, tying it back to what does all this mean for ESA and the larger industry. We need a lot more really smart people working in an industry that's redefining the interface between humans and machines and entertaining everyone on every device. Now, there's a lot of other positive byproducts to everyone moving down this path together, but we're not producing enough of them. And the average wage is $100,000 a year, and if you get in front of a class and you say, what do you all want to do? They'll say, make video games. If you tell them you are in the video game industry, you have their complete attention. They want to know, have you played this? What do you know about this? Have you met so-and-so? When's the next version of Mario coming out? They want to know these things. And how do we capture that aspirational part so that we can create this workforce of tomorrow? Very powerful motivator for us. And finally, I will just close, and then I'll look forward to your questions in the discussion, is we started this discussion 7 years ago with a meeting. 2 years after that, it was a challenge. How do we go do something? It's not a white paper. It's not a theory. Those are important, and certainly there needs to be work done in those areas. But from the industry's perspective, how do we reach kids fast and move the ball? Because that's what we need to do when you see movies like Waiting for Superman that show how desperate our challenges are, certainly in the education environment, not to mention other social challenges. And so that's our challenge, is not to say that this theory is now true, but let's prove it's true. And let's shame those into not believing, into getting on board with the rest of us. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the chance to sponsor.
Thank you. Oops, let's see here. There we go. Thank you very much. And we're going to invite Rafranz Davis also to come join us for the discussion here. And for those of you who we already have people asking some great questions coming in. If you haven't done that, you want to ask some questions, just use the hashtag, and I'm watching right here, and we'll see whoever has the most interesting Twitter handle. I'll ask your question, and we'll do it very scientifically. That's how we do things. Let me, before jumping into those questions, though, I want to ask something. This was my question on Twitter, had I posted it. I'm very curious about, in a quick statement, so this is your one sentence, maybe you can use a dash or a colon, but no more than one sentence. What do you see as the vision of the future for games and education? What does it look like? What do you imagine it to be? What excites you about the future of games for learning?
I think for me, I think what excites me is this idea of making them more immersive. That's critical, I think.
Awesome, thanks. Mike?
Moving the bottom 40% of classes in STEM subjects up to B students.
Awesome. So when you think about both of those shifts, plus some of the others that we've talked about, what do you feel like, and I'm going to ask to you in a second the one about the educators, but Mike, to you, what do you feel the game industry is going to need to do differently over the next few years to get there?
I think that the industry needs to recognize that there's a market here to serve. It's not just charity work. It's something that if you apply the talent like Jessica has done with Glass Lab, that there's a real impact. That impact is worth pursuing, and potentially there's a business there, and if it is, we should be in it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so, by the way, one of the things that are interesting when I talk to developers and we think about, feeling weird about building, media tools that are being sold to education, I remind everybody that lots of stuff is getting sold to education all the time. $8 billion worth of textbooks are getting sold to education. And so the question isn't whether or not schools are buying materials for learning. The question is, are we making really awesome materials for those schools to take advantage of, which I think fits nicely. So same question to you, but this time on the educator side, what does the education community need to do differently to meet this vision?
For one thing, we have to quit feeling threatened by games. And we have to own to the fact that we do matter to kids, and a game is not going to replace what we do, because there are things that games just cannot do that we do. And if we don't, like I showed my son's classroom with the desk, you know, we can put any kind of game in that room, but if that classroom is still an environment where all the kids are desk in rows and taking notes, that's not going to change. So we have some responsibility to change how we teach in order to make room for these innovative games.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Somebody started to clap there. Let's go. Feel free to have some energy. It's all right. So I do want to jump to Twitter now and ask a couple questions. So the first one is from Derek Robertson, who says, was in a discussion with an influential government official yesterday. Hopefully that wasn't me. I'm not influential. Never mind. We're good. With an influential government official, somebody else, about the place of games and learning in schools. And she argued that there was little evidence of impact on learning and attainment in this domain. Thoughts on that?
I think that whoever said that is completely disconnected. I think that if you live a life of, I'm just going to pretend this medium doesn't exist, then you don't recognize the power that it actually has. It is evidenced by the kids up to adults who still game. I'm going to be honest. I took hold, I mean, my son is 15. I learned how football through Madden. That's how I learned it. It wasn't, that's not, that doesn't apply.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just say that it's not informed, but it's representative of the challenge that we face.
Yeah.
Because these decisions about what to do with education policy, where to put the funding, how open to be to new technologies, these are made by people who hold those views. There are facts and there are problems. Facts you accept, problems you solve. We must solve this. We have to change their view of reality with facts. That's why the Glass Lab is focused on delivering proof that that statement you just read is wrong.
So I want to add a piece to that too, and that is that I think we do also have a little bit of a risk of assuming that because we've created a game, somehow it is good, right? And so while we're sort of all drinking the Kool-Aid here, and there's a lot of excitement around that, there is also a responsibility I think that we have to test out whether it's working. And I've built games before, and I've worked on a number of projects, and I've also built other types of media, and there are times where you have to check it out and you find out, guess what? This isn't doing what we thought it would do. And that's okay. It's a chance to shift and iterate and build something better. And so I think that's the flip side of it, is that we also have to say, we need to evaluate better what's working. And digital media provides some really neat opportunities to do that through analytics and some things that traditional media, you know, again, paper worksheets, it's hard to evaluate the effectiveness. We can do a lot more evaluation of whether things are actually working when we're in digital media. I think we need to do a lot more of that. And that's a message I'm going to take back in my role with the Department of Education, is how can we help seed more evaluation of the effectiveness of the types of games that we're talking about here today. Next question is from Antero, and he's asking here, how will ESA support youth of color in STEM and non-STEM, he says, also pathways? Any thoughts on involving youth of color?
Yeah, the principal venue or focus for that is the ESA Foundation. The partner list that I touched on at the close of my remarks is again, just a sub-list. If you look at the ESA Foundation website, there's a more full description of the types of organizations. And the foundation is focused on advancing the lives of children through technology. That's the mission. And then within that, we have a focus on women and minority students. Actually, it's young women because they have to be kids, so it's that age just underneath 18. And we partner with groups like the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, where for the last 3 years, we sponsor 20 different students in their educational activities that are focused on making games for social purposes. And then they come to Washington, and we do a program with them there, which they find fantastic. Go to the White House, go over, go to Capitol Hill, make sure that they're seeing how this connects with policymakers. Very, very powerful. And then we also have a scholarship program, 30 scholarships a year, which again are targeted at women and minority children. And we also have a challenge grant, which is available to teachers who are doing pioneering things in the classroom to say, here's a stipend, here's a bit of support for using those tools, and those are the types of things that ESA does.
That's great. By the way, in the next visit, we should also have them come to visit the Department of Education. We'll make another stop on your way up to the Hill.
Pleased to do
We're
that.
kind of between the White House and the Hill, so you can come.
It's on the way.
It's
on the way.
And anyway, we have a couple questions around the idea of assessments, and so I'm going to sort of combine them into one here. Rafranz, do you want to just comment on thinking about the types of assessments that we may want to be building. Any words of advice or a challenge that you may want to give to the industry about the types of tools for assessment?
Absolutely. I think that the one thing that we know about children is that they're able to show more of who they are and what they know when the questions that they're giving are questions that they can expand and express, and not just multiple choice. Putting the multiple choice questions in the middle of the games doesn't really give a fair assessment. Giving kids a process or a problem that they can demonstrate and show is a better assessment. And it can be done in games because you do it all the time.
Got it. Thank you. I think that is an area, if we talk about a place where there is low-hanging fruit, right? Not even low-hanging, it's like on the ground, ready to be picked up and eaten, is in the area of looking at games and what that means for assessment. We have time for just a couple more questions. Let me see if I can sneak in a few here. This one from my good friend Elliot Macy, who is asking about expanding the conversation around games. He says, can we think of it beyond just digital games? For example, First Robotics is a game that is non-tech. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, from my perspective, one of the most exciting technologies, and I've yet to experience it, but I have read about it, and I think it has great potential. I think it's called, is it Pixelberry? It's the $20 computer kit that's open source that's used, and it's...
Raspberry Pi? Is that
Raspberry Pi,
Yep.
That's it, Raspberry Pi. Sorry. Close.
I think I have one. I think I have one in here somewhere.
But you look at Raspberry Pi as an idea, these certain things used to be beyond the reach of students or teachers because they were expensive or they were complex. Now you can take computing tools, and I used a 65-in-1 when I was growing up, and you would make a transistor and make a radio and do those things. Now we have very cheap disposable computing capabilities at the same time as we have dev kits and different engines that can be used for game development. So it's children as creators, not just consumers. Those types of tools are very, very positive.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that teachers do very well, especially the ones without access to technology, is finding a way to bring games into learning that aren't things that are plugged in. And a lot of that deals with kids developing them themselves, taking a problem and making a game out of it, and really applying the skills, the design thinking skills that go into game design to more, what is it, what's the word for non-digital? Well, that's a better word, non-digital gaming. So I absolutely, I think that exists, and that's an important thing that we need to talk about as well.
Great. So we'll do two more quick questions, then we'll wrap up here. And there'll be lots of other opportunities to continue the conversation. This one from Jonathan Rochelle. JR, where are you at? Back, there we go. Question from JR is, what do edu-gaming and developers need to see from large companies in the space? The Apples, the Googles of the world, the Microsofts of the world. What do we need to see from those companies in order to bring this all about?
You know what? I think that I need to add to that is we need to see more of an approach not to just make something because you can, but to make something that really matters and has an impact. And I think that there's a lot of conversations you can have around that, and hopefully we will today.
Yeah, what I would add to that is Caroline Curtin is here from Microsoft, and Microsoft has a very deep commitment to facilitating the education environment, does a fantastic job, and now has Minecraft as a major catalyst for further success in that area. Along with Project Spark, there's a deep commitment there, and I think that other companies could model that.
Got it. Great. One question that we'll pass over, not because it's not important, but because we actually have a great session on it that I want to point people to. So there's a question about how do we promote accessibility in games for learning? And if you notice in your guides, we have a session coming up in the afternoon, in one of the afternoon workshops called Includification, which is going to be a great session on thinking through how to make games accessible for a whole variety of learners that we often leave out of the process. And so that'll be a great session that I would encourage you to go to. Last question. And this comes from Stan Frieda and says, how can educators help inform parents and administrators that there's value in using game-based learning?
Let your students be the advocates for it. I did not even realize the impact of games on learning until I started watching my own children and watching my own students, and that was the difference. So have an event. When you have teacher night, have kids demonstrate how the games that they play and how they use it, and to show that they really do have an impact and how. But you also have to have conversations about appropriateness and timing and all of those other things, but your kids are your best advocates.
After attending a quarter century of back-to-school nights, I think there probably is a moment in there where they could make that point pretty effectively.
Yeah, got it. Big round of applause for joining the conversation. Thank you very much. Okay, hey, we have, if some of you were following on the, if some of you were following on the Twitter stream, you noticed that we had a problem with the live stream a little bit. The live streamers are now here and part of the event, so can we just welcome them real quick and thank you. We're glad to have you. At last count, we had 200 of them, just under 200 of them, waiting very patiently for the live stream to click on. And so we've now doubled the size of this event, and they'll be joining on by the conversation that they will be having with us. I want to hand the time over to somebody who I have admired for years in this space, as I've read the stuff he's written and listened to some of the inspiring things that he has shared with me over the years as I've thought about in my role as an educator, how to think about games differently and the lessons that we can learn. And very, very pleased to be able to welcome to the stage Jesse Schell. Thanks, sir.
Hi, everybody. This event is awesome. When they first asked me here, I thought, oh yeah, I know, this is one of these round tables. There'll be like 12 people in a room and everyone will be like on their phone the whole time. Oh my God, there's like the 200 most amazing people in the room here. So I'm thrilled to be able to talk a little bit. So today I would like to ask you to consider the future. Because the past we might not like so much, but we can't do anything about it, right? But the future we might actually be able to do something about. The thing about the future is that it's coming at us faster and faster and faster. And that has made a lot of people what I call future blind. In the year 1000, if I ask people to imagine what will technology be like in the distant year of 1100, you'd probably do a pretty good job. But if I ask you now to imagine 100 years in the future, we're bewildered because technology comes so fast. And it's made a lot of people stop envisioning the future and just take whatever comes. And that's, the people in this room cannot afford to do that. The work you are doing is too important to just let whatever come at you. Because the truth is, you can get better at predicting the future if you practice it. I try and take this seriously. I have my own YouTube channel, the Crystal Ball Society, where I try to get myself and other people once a week to make predictions, concrete predictions, about how things are really going to go down. And by putting them on the YouTube channel, since YouTube is forever, you get held accountable for it. For people who know my book, they may, in the second edition, Lens 105 here, the lens of the crystal ball, if you would like to know the future of a particular technology, you just need to focus on what will it be like. And the question I want you to focus on today is, what will learning games be like 10 years from now in 2025? I know it sounds far away, but it's really not. 2025 is going to be here in a blink. So we should start thinking about it. And I personally think there are 5 big questions that we should all be thinking about as we go through the day and as we go through the conference here. The first one is the marketplace. The marketplace right now for learning games is terrible. It is a mixture of terrible and non-existent, okay? The stuff that's out there that's actually profitable and successful at this moment in time is mostly driven by sales based on fear. Right? We have a lot of sales to parents, like preschool is a really active, vibrant learning games market because parents are scared that their children are not ready for school. Sales of software to get kids ready for SAT tests, that's a very vibrant, thriving market. Everything else, not so much, because the parents aren't scared about the other stuff. And the teachers don't have a good way to buy things. So one of the things that is going to have to change is the marketplace. And we see the market changing. But the question is, who's going to control the market? There's some different options. Could be the hardware manufacturers. We'll just let Apple do it. Sure, whatever. Everybody likes iPads. That'll be the market. The App Store is terrible for our purposes. It's focused on consumers. Apple doesn't even care about apps that much, I'll be honest, right? 97% of their money comes from selling hardware, 3% comes from apps. Imagine how microscopic the part from selling learning games is. They are not going to optimize the App Store to be about learning games. It seems very unlikely to me. So it would be sort of scary if they end up controlling the marketplace. The textbook publishers would love to do this. They're the ones who control the old-fashioned marketplace of learning materials. They'd like to control the future one. Are they tech-savvy enough to do it? Some of the old-fashioned ones are having challenges. You got new ones kind of popping up, Course Smart and Amplify, folks like that, who are trying to say, we're going to take a new technological approach. Maybe they will do that, and maybe that's a way that things will go. Then you've got folks like GlassLab, nonprofits, popping up. Now, that's fascinating to me, and we've done a GlassLab game, and it's amazing. And I love the idea of GlassLab, but at the same time, I scratch my head a little bit because there's not a lot of previous examples of nonprofits controlling a large marketplace. And I'd love it if it can work, but will it work? I don't know. But I have another idea. One of these three, all of these three, it might be some mix, but there's someone else. When you think about how do kids get their music, and who controls the music industry? It used to be big record publishers controlled it. Now they've lost control and they're super frustrated because who's in charge? The social networks are in charge. The kids send texts and emails and Instagrams around and they listen to their music on YouTube. It's all happening on social networks. The teachers don't have a social network yet, but they're starting to maybe get one. Once the teachers have a social network, maybe they're in charge of the marketplace. Maybe they're the ones who review and say, this is best and this is not good and this is what worked for me and these are best practices. If that happened, that would be amazing. But I don't quite know what that social network is yet. Okay, second question. What role will games play, learning games, in 2025 for us? So we always talk about learning games as if they're one thing, but we can use them so many different ways. The first one that people tend to think of as, well, replacing teachers. Well, sure, there's times when that's useful. A teacher's not around, you want somebody to learn something, but that's not certainly the only way to do it. One place when teachers aren't around is when it's homework time. And I'll just say, I just want to say this, I know everyone knows this, homework sucks. Homework is really bad, not just because it's boring, homework is anti-learning. All right, and I will defend that. Here is why homework is anti-learning. You got a kid, they got to go home, they got to do their algebra homework, they sit down, they're not super excited about it, but they sit down and they do it. And they do problem 3, and they work at problem 3, and they get an answer to problem 3. And at this moment in time, they want to know, am I right? Is my answer to problem 3 right? Did I do this right? This is actually a teachable moment. And what does homework say? Homework's like, not telling. I don't know if you're right, and I don't care, and I couldn't tell you anyway, right? What you're going to do is you're going to keep doing a bunch of problems, and I'm not going to give you any feedback, and then you're going to bring it in, they're going to wait a couple days, and you're going to forget about what you did, and then you're going to give feedback at the time you don't actually care anymore, right? So this is a gigantic opportunity, interactive experiences that can take the place of homework that give you feedback immediately when you actually care as a learner are an awesome experience. Assessment is another one that people talk about. Could it be, tests have their challenges. Could it be that games have integrated assessment in a way that's really important? All these three are really interesting and all really different. And then there's another one that I think is possibly most important that is so seldom talked about. Not replacing teachers, empowering teachers. So far, learning games are generally, we're going to have a machine, the kid's going to sit at the machine, the teacher might be in the background with arms folded, but probably is off doing something else. Once we're in a situation where every teacher and every student has connected, ubiquitous technology, now the teachers can be part of the experience. The teacher can now be a dungeon master, controlling the scenario and observing everything that all the kids are doing and seeing who's falling behind and popping the right challenges out to the right people at the right times. Something that could make them incredibly powerful, could be incredibly engrossing for them. We haven't built it yet because we don't have the connected platform yet. But once we do, I would argue this may be the single most powerful use of games as a technology in the classroom. Third question. How much proof is going to be enough for us? We just had a little chat here about, is it proven that games are effective? Is it not proven? Well, that's a really, really tough question. Some games have been studied assiduously and clinically tested and proven. Other games, we just popped it out there. We hope it works. I don't know. And so there's a lot of argument about this. Should there be certain standards for what constitutes good enough before it goes out to students? That sounds sort of terrifying. That sounds like that would inhibit creativity, would make us lag behind. But if we just keep throwing whatever garbage we kind of come up with out at the students without being proved, that sounds bad too. The thing I think of is what NASA does, because NASA has this same problem. They have the technological readiness level system, which is basically a numerical system for talking about how proven something is. Something that's TRL 9 means like we've actually done successful mission operations with this, so we know it works. TRL level 1, we just kind of looked at it and we kind of hope it works and we don't know. So they have a way of talking about it. So maybe I wonder, could we develop a language for talking about how proven the effectiveness of a game is? And if certain people want to say, hey, I'm willing to do something very experimental with my students, well, then they can. And for other people like, no, I need this to be solidly proven, well, then they can. But it would be great if we could come up with a language for talking about this. Fourth question, what systems will we need in place by 2025? I think many people will agree that some level of standardized system for reporting progress in games would be very, very welcome. This is something Glass Lab and others are working on to kind of find standardized ways for us to kind of report that progress so that parents and teachers and students themselves know what's actually going on. Because the old school report card coming out 2 or 3 times a year is probably not good enough for us. But more than that, there's the hardware question. What is hardware going to be like moving forward? Because if I'd come up here 8 years ago and it's like, Palm Pilots, get on the Palm Pilot, it's the future. That's wrong. That would have been a bad investment for the schools. So laptops, are they going to stay with us? Are we going to keep typing? Are we sick of laptops? Are we done with keyboards yet? It's not clear. It seems like high school, college, laptops, I'm going to guess, I predict, are here to stay for at least another 15 years. That's my prediction. I don't know the answer to that. Tablets, where did they come in the schools? We know they're great for the young kids. My gosh, kindergartners, they go crazy for the tablets. And one of the great things with the tablets, the good ones have styluses. Apple doesn't have them, but a lot of them are going to have them. And maybe eventually Apple will have a decent stylus. And the stylus is super important because you want to do math at a keyboard? You want to come up here and do some calculus on a keyboard for me right now? That sucks. That's a horrible experience. Right? You need to do it with a pencil. And I see it in schools all the time. I see teachers, they've got, the kids have the great educational games, and they're like, that's nice, that's nice. Okay, now children, put your tablets away, take out your pencils, it's time to work. Because a pencil is what you use to work. So we need a technology that has a pencil so that we can kind of do that work. So tablets seem important for that reason. How about phones? Schools mostly hate phones. I put this weird phone because what are phones going to be like 10 years from now? I don't know. They're going to be something weird, I'm pretty sure. But phones are super ubiquitous. And if we can use that as a way to kind of get to kids at every moment, at every second, maybe there's something good in that. One thing super important, infrastructure. If these things aren't networked, it just doesn't matter. We need to get things as networked as possible because when we have ubiquitous network situations so the kids can connect with each other, can connect with the teachers, everybody can connect with everybody else, it allows all kinds of experiences that weren't possible before. Virtual reality. Who here, raise your hand if you're like, this is going to be a giant deal in education. Look at the skepticism in this room. Listen to me now, hear me now, and believe me later, this is going to make a tremendous impact on education. 2016 is going to be this giant year for virtual reality. It is suddenly going to be everywhere, like it is unstoppable infestation. And the power of the immersion and the ability to reach out into a world and use your entire proprioceptive and tactile systems to interact with a virtual world in a way that feels completely immersive is going to be incredibly powerful experience, and it's going to be useful for education in a number of ways. It's not any kind of cure-all, but there are going to be a number of experiences where that level of immersion, to go inside a human cell, to travel into the world of history, to be able to grab an ellipse and stretch it with your two hands and use like your entire body and mind to experience education is going to be incredibly powerful. At least that's my prediction. It's one of these things we're going to have to figure out. Related, augmented reality, not the same technology at all, something that allows us to overlay virtual imagery over the real world, I think is going to be very important. There's a lot of goggle systems that people are talking about and working on. I put those more coming out at 2018 is where I would see that. And they're probably going to be a little slower to roll out because the technology is hard. But again, the impact on education is potentially very, very powerful. And some of it's possible right now. I've got a project that we're doing at Schell Games that's all about chemistry. We built this physical set of atoms that you can see the little electrons and they bond together like real atoms using magnetism. Because right now we teach chemistry like it's algebra, and it's not. It's Legos. If we could just build the Legos and give them to the children, everyone could understand chemistry. And so we built these, and kids do get this intuitive understanding of how stuff snaps together. But of course, it doesn't tell them anything about what they built. And that's why we have this next part, where we take out the app and we point a camera at it. And you can see right here, you snap a little picture of this molecule you just built. It does a visual analysis. Oh, that's the water molecule. And now you can look it up and see what it is. More and more, we're going to see this use of cameras and visual analysis will allow us to use technology to take the physical world and merge it with the virtual world. And I think there's a lot of power in that. Okay, so last question. How will education itself change by 2025? Because education is changing. We're seeing it change every day. One thing is flipping, right? Flipped classrooms seem like they're going to become more and more prevalent. What does that mean for games? My suspicion is the opportunity for the flipped classroom is you go home and you do your homework, and then in class you do, you go home and you get your lectures, and then in class you have opportunity to do exercises. That, I think, is a great connected digital opportunity for the teacher to be a dungeon master. And I think that's going to be interesting. Really important, 1965 is incredibly important to us all. People born before 1965 did not grow up with video games. People born after 1965 did. As of 2013, the average American teacher was born after 1965. So we're just crossed this tipping point, and as more and more teachers are born after 1965, they're going to intuitively understand that games have power and different ways to bring them into the classroom. Also, the question of standardization. This is a really hard question. There's this big, Common Core. Is this good? Is this bad? Are we going to have more standardized education? If we are, that partly sounds kind of bad, but partly it's really good, because the more things are standardized, the bigger the market is, the more people are drawn to it to make amazing content. The more standardized education is, the more you can afford to make it big and beautiful and incredible. But on the flip side, there's also people are talking about more and more specialization. And that sounds really powerful too, but that means a very different market. That means a market for really niche products that really address the specific needs of different students. Which one is going to win out? Is it both? It's going to have a huge impact on what learning games we end up creating. One thing we can't argue with is, boy, stuff is happening at the higher education level. There's a lot of people talking about the education bubble and what's going to happen with it, and there's a lot of debate about it. But you can't argue with this graph right here. This is like real census data about the relative cost of tuition versus consumer price index versus what it costs to buy a house. This can't go on forever. Some big change is going to happen at the higher ed level. where something is going to break and something's going to change. And games are probably have a place in this, although I don't know if I know what it is yet. Anyway, so there's 5 questions I would like you all to think about, because I think the shape of learning games is going to be very much driven by these 5 questions over the next few years. Thanks very much.
All right, we are getting to the end of our opening session here, and what I have asked Joseph to do before we break out into our sessions is just give a few thoughts to frame the conversations that we're going to have. The way this is going to work is we're going to break out into some different conversations. And so I want to hand the time over to Joseph South. He's the Deputy Director of the Office of Ed Tech to help frame the conversations that we'll be having. And then I will help make sure everybody knows when they need to be back here, because we're going to adjust the time just a little bit. One thing that I will just say quickly as I introduce Joseph, I had our chief education historian at the Department of Education do some research. We don't really have a chief education historian, by the way, I just made that up. But do some research on if there had ever been any directors or deputy directors of the Office of Education Technology that had game design experience before. And it turns out that the answer is no. And at this point, it's the only time in the history of the world that we've had both the director and the deputy director that have previously been game designers. So I don't know what that means. But the difference, though, that he pointed out to me was Joseph has actually won an award for his games, and I haven't done that yet, but we'll see if I can do that someday. Please welcome Joseph South, Deputy Director of Department of Ed.
So this is awesome. There we go. So really great to be here today, and the most important thing I've learned so far today is the word proprioceptic. That is an awesome word. I'm really going to do some research on that. So I would just want to take a moment and frame what we're doing here today. We have a really eclectic group here, and that's intentional. We know that innovation happens when you go to the edges of your discipline and when you look beyond to other disciplines and you start to cross-pollinate. And what we want to do today is make that cross-pollination happen here among the designers and the researchers and the educators and bring them all together. And this is part of a larger work that we've been doing throughout the country, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. There are a lot of challenges in schools that game designers can help us address. I want to talk about one in particular, and I call this the atomization of content. So there's this theory in instructional design, and that my background is in instructional design, that if you keep breaking down the content into smaller and smaller blocks, it gets easier and easier to understand. And so over time, we've created disciplines, and that's the way our universities are divided up. And as people do research at the universities, they write a dissertation, and then they run on something more specialized and more specialized. And you can make a lot of progress this way in research. But when it comes to learning, it's not necessarily a great idea. So I want to sort of talk about how we might approach learning like this in our school. So if I was in school and I was taking Driving 101, it goes something like this. Class, welcome to Driving 101. You're going to learn a lot this year. As you know, driving is an essential skill for any responsible adult. And while you can't drive now, it's going to be really important in your future. It's going to help you get to college, and it's going to make a big difference in all the opportunities you're going to have in the future. So everybody ready? It's really complex. We're going to break it down to its simplest elements and teach you how to drive. These are piston rings. Absolutely essential elements to any car. Don't tell me about Teslas. That's 2 semesters from now. Different part of the high school, down the hall to the left. Absolutely essential. You might want to start writing this down. This is a piston head. Also essential. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. And so if we keep going down this path and we have this amazing, parceled out, perfectly boxed, shiny, put away approach to dividing up knowledge, by the end of the semester, I'm going to draw you a mind map of what all the students will have learned about driving. Okay, here you go. Awesome. We are ready to hit the road. Now, that would get you an A+ in a lot of schools, but it really has nothing about actually driving. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about game developers. They're going to do this in a completely different way. So, this is driving. Morning. Ready, set, go. All right, now we're talking. We are driving, we are drifting, we are taking the curves. And if that wasn't awesome enough, we'll just turn it up a little bit. Now we are driving. Now you know what you can and can't do. Oh, wait, we're in schools. Can't break the law. No problem, got that solved. We got the Lamborghini cop car up here. So, but what is going on from a learning point of view? Game designers start with the whole, not the parts. They focus on creating complex, challenging, and exhilarating experiences. They don't dumb it down. They understand that a good game, like good learning, is hard. It's not easy. Our brains want and need to be challenged. And they deliver on that. But we have to care about what we're being challenged about. And they make sure that what we do matters to us. They deeply understand and highlight the most essential elements of a system, help us understand those, and then build on those little by little to ever more complex and challenging vistas. They understand that if we're invested, if we are really invested in what we want to learn, nothing can stop us. And they know how to entice us to do that. And this is exactly what learners need, and they've got it. In fact, if we were handing out advanced degrees in learning, we would have the game designers up there walking across the front of the stage, and they would be getting PhDs in authentic immersive learning. They'd be getting master's degree in highly motivating problem-based learning environments. They'd be getting advanced degrees in grit and perseverance. They would be leading the field in these areas because they understand this more deeply than many, many people in our schools. It's really interesting to me to think about the fact that this is a highly advanced physics engine. Millions of dollars were dumped into creating this. Why is that not in our schools? Why are we not leveraging those resources? I spent a decade in language learning, and we talk about what makes language learning really, really powerful and really, really effective. So just think about this and think about this. It is immersive, it is task-based, it is contextualized, it is relevant, and it is what we call communicative, which just means that it falls into a flow. That's exactly what game designers know exactly how to do. So let's talk about where we are in our journey. We are building on conversations that we've been catalyzing across the country between game developers and educators. And it really started at the first ever White House Game Jam, and Mark DeLora is here, who helped put that on, so thank you, Mark. And I want to show you a few clips from this. These are clips from prototypes that were created over a 48-hour period. So this was an incredibly powerful experience for those who participated. The ratio of awesomeness to okayness in 48 hours was extremely high. It was unprecedented in game design game jams that I had been to. We worked to expand this experience beyond just the White House. We moved on to Austin and had the Austin Game Jam, where they followed the same approach. And we also moved on to here in New York City. And I got to grab my notes because I can't change my slide while you're watching this awesome demo. So you can see that they spanned a whole bunch of genres, a whole bunch of approaches. And the way we did this, and I'll tell you the secret sauce, and the secret sauce is important because it applies to everything. We had development teams where we brought in game designers who knew how to do their job and do it very, very well. But we also made sure they didn't put on their stupid hat when they started doing education. So sometimes game developers, when they walk into an education setting, they put on their stupid hat and say, oh, you want multiple choice problems? Okay, I'll make a little game for that, right? And we said, no, stay with what you know. Don't change a thing. But what we did is we paired them up with some of the best educators in the country, and we brought in students to play test and make sure that the games met their needs as well. And then we gave them a problem that was standards aligned, that was something that we have a hard time teaching in our schools in traditional methods. and said, here's something that kids really need to know. It's really important. It's really hard to teach. Help us do that. And it was amazing to watch the collaboration. And I saw these side conversations between Sony PlayStation, who were learning all about the effects of carbohydrates and sugar on our bodies, and just amazing collaborations across those different sides coming together to make something new that had never been done before. So with this event, what we want to do is bridge the distance between game developers and our nation's schools. This is long, long overdue. Do you know that the President of the United States has called for, and I quote, educational software that is as compelling as the best video games? So I just want to underscore this. The leader of the free world wants you to make awesome games for learning. You, in this room. I have a serious point, though. The White House has had 2 advisors for games that they have brought into the White House in this administration to lead the work at the White House in understanding the power of this. We are beyond the point where people are asking, does this matter? Is this relevant? We know it matters. We know it's relevant. We know it's powerful. And we are working to harness that power for good. We talk to developers around the country, and sometimes there's a reluctance that we feel from them. A lot of them weren't really engaged in school. They found their passions and their interests outside of school. They came into the game development world from the side. In fact, a lot of the skills that they use in their jobs every day, they learned at home on their own. School is not really an exciting place for them. But that is exactly why we need those game developers to come back into the school. We need to change what's happening there. We need to bring that passion and that excitement and what they know to our schools. If we can match them up with educators who understand the areas of impact that really need to be addressed, then we can do things that have never been done before. We can imagine a future where these 2 sides working together can fundamentally change the way we think about school and the way we think about learning. So that's what we're here to do today, and I'm excited to go on that journey with you.
All right, let's go take that journey. So a couple of quick instructions. Well, no, actually, I said I was going to say instructions. They said, don't say that. Say rules for gameplay, and everybody will listen. So some rules for gameplay. We have the workshop sessions that are happening right now. We're we started just a few minutes behind, and so we're going to let them run until 11:40. We're going to run, we'll give a few extra minutes for those of you who are in those sessions. As you head out to the sessions, and some are going to be down 1 floor, and some of them are going to be up on the 9th floor. We'll have people out helping point you around. And in your guides right here, it'll tell you what rooms the workshops are in, so you can look at the workshop sessions that you want to go to. There's coffee that you can grab on the way out there, so if you need to grab something to take with you, please feel free to do that. For those of you that are on our live stream will stop now for a little bit, but we'll join you again. We'll see you at 1:30 this afternoon when we're back in here for our lunch session, and you'll be able to join us again. One more thing, we will have play testing here at lunch. So when you finish your second workshop, come back. We'll have some students here, but we also want you to play test some of the games. Some of them will be the ones from the White House Game Jam. There'll be some others that you'll have a chance to play. And if you want to start a conversation that is not in one of the sessions already, if there's a conversation that we did not think of, there's a whiteboard out there, and you can put up a topic and start a conversation either in here or out in the foyer there as part of an unconference. One final thing. I said that before and I lied. Here's one final thing. We have some rings here. And we were trying to think about how we were going to encourage these sessions to really, these are conversations that we're going to have. We've been hammering it into all of the facilitators that they are not to stand up and present the whole time. They are to facilitate conversations and share some ideas along the way. And so Marcus, who's on our team, also doubles as a fashion designer, and so he has come up with some 3D printed games for learning rings. And we will give them to the session moderators, and anybody who makes a significant contribution, says something really smart, doesn't fall asleep for a while, something like that, gets one of the Games for Change rings of participation. And so watch for these going around. Go have fun. We'll see you at 1:30.